Now, you're right at your breaking point where your old identity is collapsing, but nothing new has fully formed. So you've tried to meditate it away, journal through it, and stay high vibe, but nothing is actually helping you feel clear. Now, if you misread this moment as a setback instead of a turning point in your life, you're going to stay stuck in limbo. So this video finally explains what this phase really is about and why most advice doesn't really work when you're here. This way, you can stop second-guessing your path and start moving through this with a little bit more clarity and just a touch more self-trust. So when the high of any awakening experience drops off, most people think they did something wrong. After the initial wave of insight or bliss, it's jarring to feel like the magic of my awakening has vanished. So why is it that it suddenly starts to feel like you're going backwards? Well, the first peak experience often feels like you've completely figured it all out and life's never going to be the same again. And on some level, that's true. But then that peak experience disappears without warning, and you're left thinking, oh God, did I do something wrong? Have I messed it up? Or has my practice stopped working if you already had a practice? So you start to search for a way to try and get that high back, thinking that the high was actually the real you. But what if the drop-off in energies or the drop-off of the experience isn't a personal failure at all, but it's actually a feature of the process? It's just something you have to move through. That crash that you're feeling, it doesn't mean something's gone wrong. It doesn't mean you fucked it, or that your awakening has completely stopped and you're being punished by God. But it is the start of the real work. So why does this descent feel like we're going backwards? So if the crash is part of it, why does it feel so disorienting, even wrong? You see, the ego, it just wants to keep going up and up and up like a drug addict chasing its next high. But the reality is it must come back down into the body where the shadow aspect of ourself is. See, your nervous system starts recalibrating here, and suddenly, all of those buried emotions that we've suppressed throughout all of our life, they start to surface. It's like opening Pandora's box. The survival strategies that your old identity used, like people-pleasing, overachieving, they no longer have the same pull towards them. And you don't feel that great. So you feel like you've lost your awakening and you're now stuck in an unfortunate feeling of limbo. See, but integration doesn't happen in peak states. It starts in the return to the body. And this purgatory that we must return to is where all of the unresolved stuff still lives. So here's where people screw this phase up. This part of the journey is fragile, and most people unknowingly make it a hell of a lot harder on themselves. So people get stuck here for a long time. Let's have a look at some of the mistakes they're making that make that a reality. Well, they chase another hit of clarity or another hit of the high that they had from their experience or connection, trying to escape from the discomfort of the Pandora's box that we've begun to open. They label avoidance as spiritual practice and call their denial intuition. And so that may not have landed for you, so I'm going to give you some examples as to how this looks. Let's look at somebody who's avoiding relationship conflict. The mind or the ego might say, my intuition says that our energies aren't compatible anymore. Definitely coming from the spiritual ego, that one. But really, perhaps the reality is that there's tension in the relationship. Perhaps this person has changed because of their awakening, and it's causing some friction, so he feels misunderstood by his partner. And instead of having vulnerable conversations or negotiating growth together, he wants to disconnect to avoid feeling rejected. So his spiritual ego calls it a mismatch, but it's actually fear of not being accepted as his new self manifesting. So let me give you another example of where I see this one a lot, and it's in rejecting your sadhana. Sadhana is your daily spiritual practice, by the way, that brings aliveness and brings aliveness into the system and keeps you grounded. So the ego will say, I don't feel drawn to yoga. I don't care about doing my asana or my breath work. My intuition just says I need to stay more in flow, and just give up and surrender into life. The translation? Well, this person is unmotivated, probably emotionally drained and frustrated that nothing works fast. And so rather than stick with the basics through the fog, he searches for something more elevated and skips the uncomfortable daily work that his system actually really needs. You see, this isn't intuition, it's avoidance. So in this phase, we have to be really honest with ourselves. Is it intuition, or is it, or is this resistance wearing a spiritual mask? Because people here, they swap stillness for stimulation. There's this constant seeking, endless content, doom scrolling, and they never actually sit with the parts of themselves that are falling apart. So people who get stuck here, they chase the next hit of clarity, they avoid discomfort, they're chasing the next high, and they're calling that spiritual. But unfortunately, it's just distraction. So let's have a look at the hard truth about why most people don't move forward on this path. Because even when people know what's happening, most still stay stuck. So why is that? Well, as far as I can reason it, insight feels amazing, but it doesn't actually rewire anything by itself. It just gives you momentary relief. Facing your patterns in real time, that takes effort, it takes repetition, it takes huge amounts of discomfort. So spiritual content can become a crutch, a way to passively think about growth and believe that we're growing instead of actually doing the growth. And unfortunately, most people wait to feel ready instead of just starting where they are. So most people aren't really that confused. A lot of them are just avoiding what they know they need to do. They're avoiding effort. Because integration, it's not sexy. It's messy, isn't it? Insight feels great, but practice and your sadhana is really what changes you. So let's have a look at what's really happening inside of your system. So here's what's really happening in your system, because you aren't some spiritual dumb fuck. But if you don't understand what's actually going on under the surface, you're going to keep reaching for the wrong solutions. See, most people, when they have an awakening, don't realize how much unresolved karma was already inside of them. The awakening didn't create that chaos. It just revealed that which was already inside of you. And it's just all coming up at once. It's an accelerated karmic journey, that's for sure. Because the subconscious can't suppress it anymore. So it rises fast and hard. And it's quite difficult to explain to others in a way that they'll understand, which can leave you feeling quite isolated. But without training in how to work with the identification mechanism that's going on inside of us, we unconsciously grab onto every emotion that surfaces, every story that comes up as this Pandora's box is released. We begin identifying with them. And this identity-making machine, it really needs to settle so that the awakening can be more than just mental grasping. Because your system is trying to return to truth. Not the high that you experienced, but the stillness underneath it. And that's what this whole phase is really about and what it's for. So I used a word a moment ago, karma. And let's break down what karma actually is. Because the word karma gets thrown around a lot, but if you don't understand it clearly, it's easy to tune it out or miss what's really happening inside of you or being communicated to. Now, karma literally means action. That's it. It's not punishment or fate. It's the stored momentum from your past actions and reactions. They get stored inside of ourselves. So every time that you act from fear, avoidance, or control, it leaves an imprint. Now, those imprints build up over time, shaping your identity and your emotional reflexes. And when you have a big awakening experience, that whole backlog comes up all at once, and it can be incredibly debilitating. Now, it's subtle at times, overwhelming at others, and if you don't know what you're doing with it, you'll just go back into ego because the mechanism behind the attachment is still operating. So karma just means your actions. Those are internal actions like thoughts, emotions, identities, and external actions like physically that can leave an imprint on you, i.e. via the vehicle of guilt or whatever. And when your awakening hits, all of the patterns that you couldn't see before, well, they start rising all at once. And if you don't understand what's happening, you're going to end up going right back into ego because you're just going to grip hold of every single one of them that comes up as they come up. And that won't lead to a healing. That will lead to a very ungrounded individual. So what actually helps then when nothing seems to help? Well, when you're deep in the thick of a phase like this, it's hard to believe that anything is going to help you. So here's a surefire list of what actually does. Surrender. Oftentimes, we're way too quick to try and rebuild or try and control the external world to make, the thing that's crumbling stop crumbling. But oftentimes you can't. So don't try and rebuild anything until the collapse is complete. That way you can be intuitively guided a little bit more. Also, don't try and design your own path DIY from the internet and Reddit. Just receive from somebody who knows what they're doing a simple daily sadhana that stabilizes your system. And if you want to start with us, there's a free one down below, and you can access that one down there. Another thing that I would say is non-negotiable is engage with a teacher, somebody who's lived this path, not just read about it, not somebody who's a keyboard warrior on Reddit. And then I would spend some time in nature because it really helps. Nature is really helpful to regulate your body when your thoughts are all over the place. And be around people who understand so that you don't have to keep trying to translate your experience to people that really don't get it. So stick to the basics, breathe, move, do your asana, eat, sleep, and let the dust settle before you start rebuilding anything. And also what I found from my path is taking some time off can be really powerful. Now, if you want some help while your new system comes online, I've created a step-by-step path that I've lived and thousands of my students have lived too to help you stabilize in this transition. And everything that you need to know is down below. So here's the pivot point that most people never recognize. Everything before this point was your old self trying to survive. But everything after this point is about letting it die. So how do you move through the middle without getting stuck? Now, most people miss this moment because they're still chasing bliss or clarity or the high of the experience that they had. So they try to rebuild a self that they've already outgrown, probably because they want a feeling of safety. The old self was safe. It was secure. But that, in fact, is an illusion. An identity can never be safe. It can never be secure because it always moves. It always changes. It's just a thought that we identify with. Or people think that they're regressing and then they panic and they need to fix themselves or fix it. But neither is true because this space that you're in, this phase, it isn't the end. Your life isn't actually in collapse or freefall, not really. What you're moving through is an initiation. And what matters now isn't really how long it lasts, but how fully you surrender to it. That way, you get to see what your life is really about. Now that you see this crash isn't a setback, but actually the unraveling of an old identity that can't come with you, well then, what if the way you've been surrendering is actually just that identity trying to cling to comfort in a spiritual disguise? Well, you can watch this next video to uncover the 3 hidden signs of fake or half-baked spiritual surrender and how to finally begin acting from your true self, not the one that you're outgrowing. So, if that's of interest to you, by all means, watch that one right there.